Hey, good people. Welcome to Psychology Noir. Dr. Lund here. We are still in the midst of the Letecia Stauch case, and what I want to do is give you my reaction so far to the expert that the defense have brought in to talk about Letecia and her insanity defense. The famous physician that they brought in is Dr. Dorothy Lewis, who is a clinical psychiatrist, really known for her research and her work in the field of psychopathology and violent behavior. She's been involved in a number of numerous high-profile criminal cases and has provided expert testimony in court. One of the more popular things she's been involved in is the HBO documentary Crazy Not Insane. She's also basically known for her work and her study and her research and diagnoses regarding dissociative identity disorder, the acronym DID, and has authored and co-written several books, including Guilty by Reason of Insanity, A Psychiatrist Explores the Mind of Killers, The Real War on Crime, the report of the National Criminal Justice Commission, which she was a member of, From Madness to Mutiny, Why Mothers Are Running from Family Courts and What Can Be Done About It, and A Mother's Madness, a true story of love, mental illness, and crime that shocked a family, regarding a mother who murdered her own child and explores the complex psychological and emotional factors that led to that tragedy. Although Dr. Lewis has a highly regarded reputation and has been called a pioneer in looking at individuals and violent behavior, it's worth noting that her work has also been the subject of some controversy, particularly in cases where her opinions have been challenged by other experts or criticized for being overly speculative or reliant upon unproven theories. Now, at this point in the trial, the prosecution has rested. They've called many psychologists to talk about Letecia not being insane and not meeting the criteria for a dissociative identity disorder. So the defense bringing Dr. Lewis in, this is their heavy hitter. This is apparently who they think they're going to score the points with in order for the jury to believe that Letecia is not guilty of the murder of her stepson by reason of insanity. Now, Dr. Lewis is, again, not by any stretch of the imagination a novice at being an expert witness. She has evaluated the likes of Mark David Chapman, who killed John Lennon, as well as the infamous Theodore Bundy. Dr. Lewis graduated from medical school somewhere around the 60s and has been in the profession for about 60 years. So my first impression was that there seemed to be a lot of issues getting her to the stand. And what I mean by that is they were supposed to start this morning at a certain time, and it was noted she wasn't available. Then they rescheduled her for the afternoon, and again, she was late getting to court. And there was a lot of kerfuffle around physically getting her to the stand, and it was relayed that she was using a wheelchair, so my assumption is there's some type of mobility issue. However, there seemed to be a lot of problematic issues regarding, first of all, when she got her report done, which is supposed to be 35 days before the trial starts. And it sounded like that did not happen. She also went and interviewed Letecia in jail yesterday for 3 hours, which again, by the judge's order as well as protocol, that's not supposed to happen. And so there is that snafu. There have been many snafus. There was another issue that she had asked Letecia's attorneys to have her have an EEG, neuropsych testing, and I think another diagnostic test, that when she was on the stand, the prosecution asked her if she would be surprised to know that the defense had pulled that request, even though Dr. Lewis had reported that she was told that the court could not afford those tests for Letecia. So something is not right. Some of my thinking is, granted, Dr. Lewis is semi-retired, and just listening to her, she is a woman who has a wealth of experience and a wealth of knowledge and loves talking about some of her past adventures with courts and patients and research. She has a tendency to ramble. Her communication doesn't seem very clear at times. And she really is not, I think, what I expected as an expert witness when testifying about Letecia's mental status and her status of sanity versus insanity. There were also some fairly typical questions that she had much difficulty explaining her answers to. One, for example, she couldn't tell the prosecutor the definition of insanity in Colorado. Now, granted, states have different definitions, but for an expert witness, I would have expected her to know that, because any of her outcome and her findings in her expert report would need to be in alignment with that definition to support whatever she found in regards to sanity or insanity. There was another long, confusing discussion about her not being a licensed psychiatrist in the state of Colorado, which again, for expert witnesses, you don't have to have a license in every state that you're called to be an expert witness, because you are not treating the individual. You can assess the individual, but you're not treating the individual. You usually have to be licensed in some state and then abide by, the rules of ethics and standards of practice. But again, you're not treating anybody. You're just rendering an opinion. And she seemed to have a lot of difficulty explaining that for somebody who's done expert testimony in a number of cases. In addition, while Dr. Lewis was testifying, she would relay some of her experiences with some of the patients that she evaluated and diagnosed. And interestingly, if you have seen the documentary Crazy But Not Insane, much of her stories were exactly, almost verbatim, taken from that documentary. Now, as interesting as that documentary was, it wasn't clinically based. It wasn't information that you would utilize with scientific evidence and research for something like you would do on a witness stand as being an expert witness. Even when the prosecutor, and I believe the defense, had asked her if she believed that Letecia was insane, she said yes. But her explanation was very fragmented and very confusing. However, this is what I think she said. This is just my interpretation. She was not saying that Letecia had dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder. What I believe she said is that Letecia had and was psychotic and continued to be psychotic after the murder of her stepson. Although she wasn't very clear in how she presented her outcome and exactly the evidence and symptoms that she had to support that. It was very unclear, and again, this was just my interpretation. So I think the bombshell that the defense thought they had by bringing in this renowned expert really turned into a bomb. And unfortunately, I think this doesn't help the case in the least. But being an older clinician myself, it's one of those moments you think, geez, I hope when I get to that point, somebody tells me enough is enough. Just get a hobby, because professionally, you need to let it go. And so, unfortunately, I felt that was where Dr. Lewis was at in her testimony. As I said, she wasn't clear. She was very fragmented. I think she was very upset, and rightly so, about feeling that she had been deceived by the attorneys for Letecia. And that happens to many an expert witness. I have had that happen myself and have come off of cases because, one, I didn't want somebody else to ruin my career. I can do that on my own. But when an attorney tells you they're going to get you testing or get things that you need to do an adequate assessment and to testify in court to that, you expect that to happen. And when Dr. Lewis had heard that the defense pulled the request for the diagnostic she asked for, and she was under the assumption that cost was the issue, you could see that she was visibly angry by hearing that news. And I think Letecia's attorneys have some culpability in some of the issues that came up today. I don't really know why the lateness and why she wasn't where she needed to be at the time that court started, because she did get a reminder from the judge at the end of the day to be there on time tomorrow morning. That's a reprimand is really not something an expert witness wants, nor does it look good. Even if it's not in front of the jury, it just doesn't bode well for your professionalism. But even the interview with Letecia in the jail on a Sunday, an expert witness cannot make arrangements to see a defendant on their own. That has to be coordinated and set up, and that's usually done through the defendant's attorneys. And so they had a part in this interview that apparently was inappropriate for this case. So I think some of it is Dr. Lewis's style, fragmentation, I think the issues of, she's a great storyteller at this point in time, but does not come across very well in this trial, in the testimony she gave today. And again, I think in part and parcel, there is some responsibility on the attorney's side, as many times an expert witness will basically keep their mouth shut to cover for attorneys if there's been a mistake that's been made, to sort of help them save face, as you watch the attorneys kind of throw her under the bus and never step up to the plate and said, well, we made arrangements for that, or that was our idea. None of that happened, at least not what we, the public, could see on the televised stream of today's testimony. So I don't think this was very effective. I think it wasn't a career builder. I think Dr. Lewis has built her career, and this is not a case that she needs to leave a legacy on. I think it's not looking well. I think it's not helping her credibility for all the work she's done through her career, and it's certainly not helping the defense's case, because it looks, again, so fragmented, unpolished, unprepared for, and again, it seems like it's a bit of just a debacle. So that's what I see from this expert's testimony. One of the reasons I love to watch trials is to watch expert witnesses and see what they do well and what they don't do well. In addition, I think there needs to be a good look at Letecia's attorneys, that I think there are issues with some of their behaviors during court. However, I thank you all for listening. And please like and subscribe and leave your comments on your thoughts about the illustrious Dr. Dorothy Lewis.